The following podcast may contain adult language and an abundance of salt. So get ready, nerds, because we're talking to the Action Unit Director, James Madigan from Apple TV's SEE. Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Salty Nerd Podcast, where we get to talk to people from SEE, apparently, which is awesome for us. I am joined, as always, by my fantastic panel of nerds. Matt Vader is here. Welcome, sir. How are you doing, buddy?
Hi, how are you?
Good. You look bundled up today.
It's chilly.
I woke up cold, man. It's like 72 degrees outside.
And you're bundled
and
up.
I'm like freezing. Right.
I like your little toque.
Thanks.
72 degrees, and the guys who shot episode 8 are just like, fuck you, Vader.
Shit. I'm like, you what?
They're up there in
No,
Canada getting rained on.
No, it's in the 40s outside. That's chilly for
Vegas, I guess.
here, man. My blood's thin.
I guess.
I'm weak now.
Weak. You weak.
I know.
The ambassador of estrogen, wearing her Chet shirt. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Are you excited?
Yes, very excited.
I'm stoked. And the frustrated producer of the show, Matthew Cage.
See, I look forward to these types of interviews because James is like my people, the behind the scenes guys, behind the camera, doing the directing, all the actors and stuff. That's your guys' stuff. James is my wheelhouse.
And the man of honor, James Madigan. Welcome, sir. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me. This is a lot of fun.
Of course. So just to get started, we talked about it before we started recording, but how did you hear about us? And what were your impressions when you started checking out our show?
All right. Well, I was in Peru. I've just been directing the action on the next Transformers, and I was communicating with the other director who I worked with on season 2 as he was finishing off season 3, and about everything they were going through. And he was like, "Have you heard of the Salty Nerds?" I was like, "No, what's that?" He's like, "We all listen to them. We love them." I'm like, "What's going on?" He's like, "Just check them out." And he sent me a link, and I put it on and started listening to it. I was like, "Oh my God." I think it was the one that was, I think it was when you saw the first episode of season 2 and you were like, "What the fuck is going on? This show's getting pretty good." Which was funny. And just basically taking the piss out of everything that we kind of ourselves, I mean, we're people going through it just like anybody else. So there are times where we're kind of asking similar questions about things that we see, from a little bit deeper in it. But so we found it all very entertaining. I would say, like, we get a kick out of it. I'm not sure how Archie feels. But he's an awesome guy, so I'm sure he's trying to have a sense of humor.
Well, we love Kofun.
Yeah.
Make no mistake about it.
We love to talk about Kofun a lot.
We love to talk about how frustrating he is, but Archie sees it too. He messaged me on Instagram. He's like, I love that my character can frustrate you guys so much that you talk about him as much as you do. Mm-hmm. So it's all good. He's a professional, and he has. It
is an important, in the mechanism of the story with so many characters. It's an important part of it. If you just had something where nothing annoyed you or nothing happened, then you wouldn't keep watching.
I think we should amp it up for next season and give Archie like his own segment on the show. It's the Archie corner or whatever.
Here's like he just comes on the show and he's like, "Yeah, this writer I owed some money to," and so like he decided to take it out on my character.
Yeah, I had an affair with his wife.
we could call it the
Kofun corner.
No, the Mandekwe minute.
Oh, I
is
like
that. How you pronounce it, James? Do you know how to pronounce Archie's last name?
Yes.
Madigan?
That was correct. I thought oh man, on the spot. That's going to be the viral moment that comes up.
Well, we read it.
Corrected him for months. He doesn't know. I think it's Madigan, but I could be wrong. Sorry.
We read it in text and we're like, I don't even know how to try.
You sound like me trying to pronounce Denis Villeneuve.
We asked Chris Aruda how you pronounce it, and he's like, "I got no idea."
Yeah.
I have a question for you because I've been scrolling through your IMDb and it's pretty freaking impressive. So I have a question about how you kind of got started in this line of work.
Real quick before you get into that.
What's up?
So a lot of people probably don't know what an assistant director or second unit director is. So I just wanted to start off by having James kind of explain what a second unit director is and what role they play in a movie and TV film, just to give everyone a little bit of context before we dive into his career.
Yeah, good call. I think people don't realize that a lot of times on a movie or a TV show, there's the name, like Spielberg or Fincher or whatever. But often, not always, some directors like Bay and Nolan, won't have second units, but often the action scenes, like everything you would see in the trailer, other than that they use to promote the movie, or other than people talking, or is often directed by a second unit director. And a second unit director will specialize in action and action sequences. It can be confusing because often, traditionally, it came out of like, we need someone to pick up the inserts of someone picking up a pen or whatever, and that's kind of how it started, to just do things that basically you needed someone less skilled to do, to just get it out of the way so we can move on before we lose the light. But now it's on big action movies. It will often be an entirely separate unit that will direct these things. And I came out of it from actually creating set pieces coming out of visual effects. So yeah, I mean, a second unit director will basically direct all the action scenes, fight scenes, things like that.
And so from my understanding, so like, for instance, when Peter Jackson was directing Lord of the Rings, I think he had like up to 9 different second units all out there filming stuff, because he was filming all 3 movies at once. With a TV show like See, you guys are filming multiple episodes at the same time. So I imagine that, someone like you is absolutely necessary in order to get everything that you need for the show.
It was a very specific situation on See, because a lot of times it'll be the action will be separate, and you might get the main actors here and there. My background is a little bit unique in that I came out of theater. I'm very actor orientated. All the directors that I work for know that they can give me full dramatic scenes, give me any of the actors that they want. So what they needed on See wasn't necessarily a straightforward second unit thing. They were coming out of the pandemic, and usually there'd be a different director every episode, and they decided just to bring in a whole new team for every episode was going to be dangerous. So they were going to have Anders Engstrom direct everything, and then have someone direct the action. But it's not a situation where, on most things, where it's like a guy comes in and does the action. All of the dramatic beats are intertwined with the action on See. All of the actors do their own action on See. So you need a second unit director that's got to be able to have Jason Momoa, Dave Bautista come on their set and have some idea how to talk to them about actually, dramatic pieces, and, because you can't just separate those things out. So they really needed someone that has that background. I mean, I'm directing action on these things, you want to be, at least I want to be, a main unit director. And it's kind of like, it's a way to get in the room. And, if you're on these things, it's a pretty great gig. But for me, it's mostly about directing the actors is the main thing that I really love. So they really needed someone that wasn't just only a straightforward action unit director. They needed someone that would be able to talk with the actors as well.
Right on.
So that's how that situation came to be on that. And it was like height of the pandemic. It was like the very worst of all of it when we were like one of the first productions to get up and running. It was pretty hairy.
So you're saying you're overqualified for your current job and need a promotion?
I'm overqualified for my current job. That's the way I feel about it. Yeah.
We can support
but yeah,
you with
yeah. I mean, it is some action unit directors specialize mostly in driving scenes. Some action unit directors specialize mostly in fight or martial art things. So everyone's sort of got their wheelhouse. For me, I have being able to mix in some dramatic scenes. Like I did, like you guys were talking about the penthouse. Like, what is this perfectly preserved? Where they have their like. There's no action in that. I directed all those scenes.
Okay, cool.
So that they'd be able to trade. It was a real mix and match. I mean, it was a funny thing. Like me and Anders couldn't be in the same room. Like we would only meet face to face very, very rarely, and then FaceTime a lot, because it was like, if one of them gets it, the other guy's got to do it. You can't lose both of them. So it was very much sort of like a mix and match of a back and forth, but other than that, I did all of the fights or all the action and the whole Green Hill Gap battle in episode 8. Yeah.
So
are you the one responsible for the pulling of the rock instead of the pushing of the rock off the cliff? Is that right?
Yeah. I was emailing with Matt, and I can only get so far into this without getting into trouble, but literally spent all of post being like, how do we justify this?
Like, he's over here, man, I hope nobody notices.
No wonder these people like our podcast. They're like one of us.
One thing Tropper mentioned was like, at the end of the day, the episode was like 90 minutes, and there were lines in there that were sort of setting up like what this place is and how it works, that just sort of fell by the wayside. I mean, my take on action is that the less time the audience is spending while you're in it going, wait a minute, that's bullshit, the more fun they're having.
Sure.
So my take on it is like, you want to get all that out of the way. So in the back of their mind, they're kind of like, okay, now I'm just in my armchair and I'm down with it. Tropper has so many hilarious, like terms for things. Like I would bring things up. He's like, man, that's like and I'm not sure what the show is, but I think it was Hawaii 5-0. He's like, oh man, that's like a Hawaii 5-0. And it could be NCIS. I don't know. I don't want to cast aspersions on anybody, but I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, you ever seen that show? It's like everything that comes up. It's like, this scanner is exactly made to do. And then sure enough, it comes up later. It's like, I don't want to be making a movie for the dumbest guy in the audience, right? And there's a real point to that, like there's like Hitchcock's favorite quote is logic is dull. And it is like, if you're spending forever losing people trying to set these things up, it can just become a real drag. But at the same time, it's about finding that balance. And there were certain things in there that sort of set up like how Green Hill Gap worked. Green Hill Gap is the fortress. Mm-hmm. And like you guys pointed out the wide shot, I don't know what happened in post, but it was supposed to be this gorge that there was no way around. Like and in the middle gap. Was this Yeah. I mean, it's called Green Hill Gap. So when it was like this open plain with mountains in the distance, I was like, second unit director's not in post. But, that was the idea. What we talked about was that these two mountains came down. There was it was like 300. Like the only way through was this gate. And when you got in there, the enemy didn't know that there were trenches. The enemy didn't know that there were these booby traps. I don't want to get too off topic, but there's a couple of things that I just want to cover on this topic, which was Ito just rushing in. Mm-hmm. Ito's whole thing is like, these guys are fucked. Like, I've got them. Our army, and I don't know how much of the language actually stayed in, but there was a lot of like, these odds are overwhelming. We're all going to die. All the Pines are going to die. Yeah. And we're just going to try and hold them off as long as they can until Magra can get to safety, because this is over. Ito knows it's over. And he's kind of like, I've had it. I am steamrolling these people. I know I'm going to lose some guys, but I'm going to go in, guns blazing and just go over them. The next thing they know, there are trenches. So their overwhelming odds, they lose that advantage, right there. They don't know about the fire. They don't know about these different things. And the ice was only supposed to be an absolute last resort if they still got down there and they still had some kind of force left. That was sort of like the nuclear option if they went down there. Now, Vader's issue with the crossbows. When we talked about the idea,
clear your name, James. Get in there.
He's like, I'm going to teach these salty nerds a lesson.
Oh, this is the Master Blaster stuff, right?
So, but this is really interesting because I've designed I don't know how many action sequences, and you'll do a previs or you'll do an animatic or whatever, and it's really important when you show it to people. It doesn't matter what you thought of it. It doesn't matter whether or not you think that thing was clear. When people, especially people like you who care about the details and are paying attention to them, and didn't get it, you can't blame Tropper kind of said this too. You can't blame them. It's like, we didn't make that clear enough. But the idea was, we know their tactics. We know they're going to send scouts in, and then they're going to come in with a wave, and then they're going to do this. And the idea was that the person who can see has an arrow that makes noise. And she's going to take the line and she's going to put a marker on the right and a marker on the left. And then the spear people are just hearing that. And it's like hitting the broadside of a barn. Even if 40% of their spears miss, they've got that bell that arrow went in on the right. And they've got that bell of the arrow that went in on the left. And they're hearing, it gives them sort of a left and right of frame to throw their spears, which is what the mechanism of that is. So if you look at her, the first time she pulls an arrow back, we kind of zoom in on this bell and she goes flap, flap. And then they're like, whoosh. That was the thinking. Now, whether or not we made that clear enough, that's on us. Now, so we do that, right? Pines are doing that. They've got a technique and an idea that is sort of keeping the wolves at bay. And it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do about this? The idea with the archers was the arrows were supposed to fan, right? So you've got 3 archers, and each of them have 3. It's like a shotgun instead of a sniper rifle.
Gotcha.
So you've got 3 arrows that are going out like this, and they're side by side, which means as long as he's given them a general coordinate, when they fire there, as long as they get the height right, it's like whoosh, they've sent out a wave that's just going to hit whatever the pines are on the other side. And one thing I tried to do when the archers first come in, I go through, so they've got shields, right? We protect them, shields go down, they fire, the shields come back up. And I went through the shields and right into a close-up on the 3 arrows. You know, maybe it owes like a top shot seeing them. It's just that when an arrow flies, it happens over a frame. So you're not necessarily seeing the trajectory. Right. But that was the idea there. But the prop itself didn't really fan. It was just 3 going straight. So maybe that's what kind of blew the theory of it, or at least visually.
I didn't know there was 3 arrows.
I thought they were just shooting 1 arrow each.
Yeah, so did I.
I also had an issue with the sighted people on the Pine side not telling people to duck.
Yeah. I mean, it happens. The idea is that, a lot of these things is you lay something out and then it comes down to really how they put it together. But it happens so fast that Haniwa pulls Charlotte down. I think that made the cut.
Yep, that did.
And then, we needed some ADR there for sure. Get down!
Yeah, duck! So, speaking of like all these awesome action scenes that you've directed and stuff, how has filming action scenes for C compared to some of the other big budget movies that you've worked on, as far as working with the actors and the budget and dealing with COVID and stuff like that? How did that experience?
Well, it can't compare at all because of the COVID thing was bonkers. I mean, it was, it made everything. When Tropper talks about the slog, he's talking about Green Hill Gap. I mean, well, I wasn't there on season 3, and I'm sure it was sloggy, but my God, it was brutal. It was in December in Toronto. It was blizzard or pouring rain or freezing cold or something, every day. And it was pretty tough. The shortest days of the year. I mean, I shot that final fight. I directed that fight to the death with Ito and Baba. And I had 2 half days for that, 2 half short days for that. Wow. On a feature film, you would have weeks. I mean, you would have more time than that,
Did Bautista's wrestling background help in that kind of a thing?
No, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's so hard to not go off on a million tangents here, but so that scene, I've just joined C at this point, and that's going to be the first thing that I do.
Man.
That's
the climax of the show.
Yeah, the climax of the show. Jason Momoa, Dave Bautista in a one-on-one battle, and that's your first day on set.
And I don't really know them yet, and the way that it works is it's always different. But you have a stunt team, and that stunt team can vary between absolutely great, pretty good, not so good, incredibly unhelpful, right? Generally speaking in life, on movies, I've never experienced a group of guys on anything I've worked on like these guys. I mean, they were absolutely incredible, and it's Jason's team.
Mm-hmm.
So John Valera is a stunt coordinator, fight choreographer, and that group kind of goes with Jason wherever he goes.
Wow.
So, and it all happens. It all happens to varying degrees, but they will sit down and work out a stunt viz. John has worked with him forever. His double Kim is like a genius. I mean, he's just like he could look at something really complex and do it perfectly without even trying, and also have the character in it. Like he's quite amazing. So working it through with him is kind of like working it through with Jason. He'll know exactly like, this arm's stronger than that arm. This is better. Like he's just physically knows Jason inside and out. So it's this unbelievable asset. Plus he's Australian. He's like the best dude. He's this like really mellow guy who could probably just like kill you, just like he's just this big, strong, incredibly coordinated man. So they'll work it out, and they'll send stuff to Jason here and there, and he'll kind of look at it and say maybe this, maybe that. I'm sure his input is massive. And then you'll get there on the day, and sometimes you'll have to call an audible and come up with something else. Jason could be thrown something incredibly complex like that. Try it out once, and he's got it perfect. I mean, another tangent to go on, but that opening bit when he just says, "Take the fucking fort," and they come in, and it's that oneer that goes on and on and on. So that involves the whole cast. Like 60 stunt guys. The amount of people that need to, like, we shot that for like a half a day, like that shot. Like,
that was a dope scene, though.
That need to hit their marks and do everything right. So the other actors hadn't really walked it through, and for that, for his part, Jason hadn't loads of times either. So we were like, all right, so everyone's kind of got their bits, and I'm standing next to Valeria, and we're watching the monitor, and we're like, okay, so the camera kind of needs to know where everybody's going to be. Everybody else needs to know where everybody else is going to be. So let's just do it 50%, half speed, so slow motion, so kind of just walk through the beats, and action. And Jason's like, "Rah!" Just like, well, like whoa. But I mean, like it's like he was just fully into it, hitting every mark perfectly every time. And no matter who you are doing this kind of stuff, you could just move the wrong way. I mean, he's picking up bodies and throwing them and all kinds of things. You could just move the wrong way and get hurt. And then what do? You know what I mean? But so you don't want to use too many takes, but just incredible, and he's kind of got one mode. So we get to the point in the fight where they flipped onto the ground, and it's like the whole last third of the fight. And for several reasons, we couldn't go with what had been rehearsed and worked out, which means that what the camera's figured out to do, what Dave has figured out to do, what Jason has figured out to do, where we're lighting it, everything is kind of out the window. And we've got like an hour, like a couple hours left. And it's like, we need to choreograph an entirely new fight right now. And we're on that bridge. We went over into the field. Dave and Jason, basically the two of them just worked this thing out. Oh, maybe like this, maybe like that. I was like, get the camera over here so we can figure out as they're going, like where's the best place to be. They spent maybe 10 minutes. I mean, this is the kind of thing people would spend weeks, maybe months choreographing. They spent maybe 10 minutes working out the whole last 30% of that fight. And then they were like, okay, let's go. Went up onto the bridge, shot it in one take.
Nice.
Wow.
The first take was just about perfect. There's a bit where like Dave swings and he tackles over him, which like the camera wasn't quite in the right place. So we were like, man, I could live with this take, but let's do a second one. And we did a second one, and that's actually the one in the movie. But I mean, I like it's when we do these long takes, like Valeris, the stunt guys will be next to us, and I'm just going, "We're still good, right? We're still good," because they're looking at every possible detail. I'm looking at like 60 different people, and it's like, as far as I can tell, we haven't missed, right? We haven't. We're still good, right? Yeah, we're still good. We're still good, right? We're still good. Yeah, we're still good. Oh my God, we're gonna get this. We're gonna get this. We're gonna boom, you know. And it was one of those just absolutely magical moments, kind of with the sun setting and it being like, "There's no way we can come back here tomorrow." Where
That's
these
awesome.
two men, I've never seen two actors, not stunt guys, literally with no rehearsal, just go on camera and nail it. It was that moment on that bridge with that last third of that fight was one of the most incredible things I've ever experienced on a set.
Real quick, I had heard that Momoa was recovering from some injuries when he was shooting that scene. Did that affect how you shot it at all?
Yeah.
Oh, there's a story there. I can hear it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, with all the stuff he does, there's going to be certain things that he's got to. Where did you hear that?
I think it was either Chris Arruda or Tropper mentioned it, that he had been like nursing a knee or a shoulder injury or something.
Yeah. Yeah, true. I mean, it through a lot of that, there were certain things that, like I say, that you just gotta protect and you gotta be careful of. And he had to move in a very specific way, and never stopped. Never
What
once.
A pro.
It was incredible. I mean, like, we all knew what he was protecting, you know, and what he had to do. And you would never look at that and think like, oh, this guy, you know, isn't.
There was that one scene where I think Dave Bautista throws Jason Momoa and he does like this cool little tumble and then just stands up and it's all one fluid motion. And he's just, it's like it never even phased him. And that, like, thinking that he
Is
just
that like the opening, the first time they hit and he rolls out?
I think so. Yeah. He rolls out and just stands up like a freaking boss. I was like, oh my God, dude, that's so freaking cool. And now hearing that those guys just kind of got together and was like, yeah, we're just going to do this. And it kind of just fell into place.
That's, I think Batista's wrestling background probably did a lot to help that out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And Dave would again, just physically things, he would just pick things up. There's this thing about like the two of them. I mean, they're two like absolutely massive people, but Bautista is like a mountain of a when you're like standing in front of him, you're just like, my God, he's just gigantic. He's just a gigantic man, and he's just very broad. He's like a mountain of a guy. So to have someone be able to stand toe to toe with him and throw him around and have it be believable, it's just to be standing in front of it is really remarkable. Then Jason does this thing where, like, as soon as the take is, he's like, I gotta see it. and he'll watch it and he'll be like, yeah. I think it's good. Like he'll finish it and you'll know he's hurt and he'll be like, yeah, I think we got that right. And then I'll watch it and it's like really good. But there's a part of him that's like, shit, I know I can get it better. All right, let's go. You know, like he always wants to go again. He always wants to watch it, make sure it's the most perfect thing it can be, and try it again to the point where you're sort of like, is this okay? You know, like if you're the director, someone gets hurt on your set, you can say anything you want, but it's on you. You know, the buck's got to stop somewhere, especially if it's, you know, one of the biggest stars in the world.
No pressure there.
So,
yeah, no, you're good.
You know, do you get to a point where do you just say, no, I can't let you do this again? When like someone like Jason's like, let's go. You know?
Yeah, you got to kind of match his energy.
Yeah, you got to match his energy, but you got to keep him safe too. But yeah, so it was it was quite a thing.
How did Dave Bautista come on board for season 2? Was that Jason?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I wouldn't know that. I think Tropper talked a bit about it. I think, you know, like Jonathan was saying, when he came in, the way that season 1 had been left, there was kind of no interesting way to carry it on, from what I've heard. And I think they really like the idea of there being this brother in Travantes and trying to play onto that. And I kind of love Tropper's notion of like all these years in Cinemax and the notion of like, let's get another megastar in the show, and it being like,
Yeah.
they're on crack, and now it's like Apple's like, sure, see if you can get him, But I don't really know any of the details of the behind the scenes on this.
Have you watched season 1?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
no, but I don't know what it was originally. So I think the last 2 episodes where it ended was going somewhere else. But yeah, when I got the call for it, and it was like the middle of the pandemic, like there was nothing in production, and it was like, hey, this thing's going on, and you'll be directing actors and dramatic stuff and doing action. I'm like, oh my God. But I have to watch this show in the next like 24 hours. It was just kind of a straight through sea fest. I watched it.
We've done that.
Yeah. So, did you just direct the action in the final episode, or were you involved in any other?
No. All through it. All through it. Anytime people are fighting, yeah.
So the whole Trevante scene in the first episode where Jason Momoa is like fighting all the guards and stuff like that, that was you?
The opening? Yeah, I directed that whole scene.
Nice.
The very opening of it when they're like, who's there? And he cuts off the guy's leg and all that.
Yeah, no, I was talking about like after he crawled through the tunnel.
That's one bit I didn't do. So they had shot a bunch of things before the pandemic. They shot like right up until they got shut down. I think they'd gotten like 1 done and a bit of 2. And so there were some things that were actually shot. So like the only action scene in the whole series, and I could be wrong, that I didn't do was when they're kind of leaving and there's that bit by the gate and there's like one long steady cam that kind of goes around them, that shot. Yeah, I did not direct that. I did not direct that.
Well, that action scene sucked. So.
Tell me, James, working in this show, in this universe where everybody's blind and you have these blind warriors, what kind of challenges does that bring to the table as far as like choreographing fight scenes and dealing with making things believable?
Yeah, I mean, that was like my main concern going into it. And literally my office was across the hall from Joe Strecce, who's our blind producer. And just was constantly talking to him about like, how would it work? What could you do? How do we echolocate? How do we make this believable? Because you do kind of get to a point where you just kind of have to go for it, because you can't be in a battle being like, wait a minute, are you a good guy? Okay. Are you a good guy? No, God. You can't have that. And it's the whole, logic is dull thing where you just, at some point you got to kind of go for it. And I talked with Jonathan a lot to it. And that's how, I kind of felt like we needed, that's how the line went. I don't know if it goes by so fast. I don't know if anybody notices it, but I was like, can we say something about how their uniforms like make different sounds? Like there's this arrogance in the Trevante's uniforms. I don't know if they ever really explain it, but they have these things called stingers on their boots, which when they walk, they basically make this noise. And it's like a shock and awe thing where they're just no one can beat the Travantes, right? So the Travantian army. So it's sort of like when you hear them coming, it's like, just surrender. You know what I mean?
There was a scene where Toad explained to Kofun, and Kofun's just like, Toad, I can see. and Toad's
exactly.
Like, oh, right,
So I mean, I don't know. This might get disputed, but I got that line in there. So he said, like something about how their uniforms, and he said something like, if it clangs, kill it, or if it sounds like steel, kill it. And it's always tricky to take credit for anything because everyone might remember it differently, but that was definitely something that I pushed to get in there, because otherwise it's like I was saying, you want to set up some things so you can be off to the races once the action start. You don't have people sitting around calling bullshit on it, because it just takes them out of it. So I was like, well, let's just at least give them something to go on, so it's not like, wait a minute, how are all these blind people doing this?
I remember in the very first episode of season 1 when they have that big melee with the Witchfinders. And
I'm with Vader on that. I loved that. That was cool. Wait a minute, are you talking about the Rockwall one?
Yeah, the Rockwall scene. But like, I was just like, how do they know who they're even fighting? Like it was such a cluster.
But they had Iras who could, people who could like smell the wind and tell you
Sense the rage.
what was going on. You know, so
It's a little tricky because you get into like, is this fantastical, like some of, and I feel like in season 1, I don't know if they ever really themselves made a decision on, is this a fantasy show or is it fact based? Our take on it was that we now have blind people that can echolocate, like that scene in The Dark Knight when he's got that thing and all the echoes are like all the cell phones, like can basically make a picture. We have blind people that can see that way, you know. And the idea is that if you have that kind of hearing and you have those kinds of other senses that are heightened, that you do have this nearly supernatural ability to create a picture in your mind of what's around you, you know. So it was kind of playing on that caveat a little bit, and playing with the idea that they make different sounds when they move. And there was one bit that I really tried to drill down on when Jason takes off the armor down on the ice, where he, you know, we had all these different tableaus, and I really wanted it to be like, this is the image that a blind person sees, made up of these different things. And we got these special kinds of lenses where your depth of field is like a centimeter, and literally got like super close on a boot where the focal plane will just drift right through that thing. And it's sort of like that sound and all these different sounds, or this is kind of like how it's hitting him. And it was supposed to be sort of the culmination of all this different, you know, all these things he wanted to get away from, all this like death and murder, and then like now his kids are in it. So we did one of those with Archie and Nesta, just to get that in it. And that was like one little beat that I really tried. I mean, I was trying to make it even a little more artsy than that, but it was sort of like, well, it has to be.
Well, I think the introduction does a really good job, like introducing like, this is how people see. And I really loved the integration of the echolocation in season 2. Like I felt like season 1 was really lacking that, and once I started seeing that in season 2, I was like, yeah, thank you, because that was like something I was headcanoning for season 1.
Yeah, it starts with that opening scene of the guys going through and who's there, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah, one of the first things we noticed about season 2 was how much more attention they paid to like how people are communicating, not visually but through sound. And then we were like, oh, thank God they're doing it.
They immediately started answering questions that we gave them a rough time for in season 1. And we're it's like, oh, well, hey,
there's the answer.
There it is. You know, it's like, oh, they got
had you guys been doing that before? When did you guys start giving C a rough time?
Episode 1 when it first released.
Our podcast.
As soon as Queen Kane started praying, we were all in. We were like, "What the holy fuck is happening right now?"
Yeah,
it was wild.
Literal holy fuck.
Yeah. Nice.
Like, fitting. Very good. But
we were on board. Jude especially, she was like, we have to talk about this show.
Yeah. We figured out how many water bottles got their backs sent down that river over the course of like 12 years.
This guy's been scavenging water bottles for years.
13,000 water bottles.
We were like doing research about how long it takes a tire to decompose.
We were immediately obsessed.
It takes a while,
in
right?
fact, we were so obsessed that when the show started getting good in season 2, Kadish was so bad.
I was upset. I was like, why is the show good all of a sudden? I like my bad
It's so
scene.
hard to make fun of it.
We do our best.
Does it get hard to make fun of it now that like you're having big stars come on and it's like, can
No.
you still be...
There's still Kofun.
I was very refreshed to see the Frank talk about episode 8, because I do think that there's, you know, I mean, we should hear from the fans about stuff that is, like I say, like years of designing action scenes and then hitting play for like the studio. you know, and starting it being like, well, those guys don't get it, fuck them, you know.
Well, I think that the important thing is like we're always just honest with what we think about the show. Like we don't go into stuff looking to like tear it down specifically. We watch something and we're like, we have thoughts and we want to share them.
I mean, generally, at least most of the time, I'm like 3 or 4 shots in, and my mouth just says stuff before my brain engages, you know. So it's like, oh, I guess I'm owning that one. So.
Matt, does your shirt say "Strange Things Afoot" at the Circle K?
It does. Yes.
Oh my God, that's the best. That's hilarious.
I got him.
Things afoot. You know, and just a little side note: there was a scene in Bill and Ted 3 where they themselves, as 50-year-olds, are there in that scene. So there's a whole scene where they land in that scene. It was going to be us comping them, current Bill and Ted, into the old footage of that scene. Like they're running around the back, like, don't run into him. You know, there was this whole thing.
It's important to point out that you actually worked on Bill and Ted Face the Music, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually going from Snake Eyes to Bill and Ted to Snake Eyes to Bill and Ted. Like it was one of those things like, you're not around next week? It'd be like, well, I kind of have to go do Bill and Ted for like a week. Yeah, it was entertaining.
Snake Eyes, you said. That bus and motorcycle scene.
Oh yeah,
that was all you, right? Did you have anything to do with that?
Oh, yeah,
that was like the best part of the whole movie.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
I love that fight.
I felt I got like Matrix vibes off of that, where she's like, yeah, that was dope. That was cool. What's your favorite project that you've worked on? Obviously, besides C, as far as like action goes, what movie would you point to? Be like, man, I had a good time doing that.
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was the best time I've ever had on a movie. But
I have questions about that movie.
Yeah, can we get into that?
Probably, yeah. Probably Transformers 7. I mean,
okay.
And obviously can't really talk much about it, but you know, just in terms of what we're after, what we're doing, how interacting with the main unit director, and look, all the main unit directors I've worked with are close friends of mine, but Steven, it's a guy named Steven Cappell Jr. He did Creed 2.
I love that movie.
Just he's amazing. Like genuinely, like it's going to be a really good movie. I honestly believe that it's going to be a really good movie. And we were just doing big, exciting stuff, and we were well supported, which doesn't always happen. So yeah.
Did you get to work with Sean Connery on League of Extraordinary Gentlemen?
I certainly did. Yes. Yeah.
What was that like?
Sean Connery's last movie.
Yeah.
You know, most of my favorite Sean Connery quotes are even too salty for this podcast.
Well, I don't know if you know us that well, sir, but there is nothing too salty for us.
The best quotes the really good ones only are just the C word every other word. Yes, it was basically, there was this, one of the producers told me that he said to him, you know, I passed on The Matrix because I didn't understand it. And I passed on The Lord of the Rings because I didn't understand it. And I don't understand this, but I'm not passing on it. It's kind of how he wound up there. You know, it was fraught in the sense that, the director and Sean didn't get on, and the director is now a very good friend of mine, so I probably can't be too frank about.
Yeah, so Stephen Norrington, right? The guy directed the first Blade.
Yes, who had done the first Blade.
Yeah, I remember like after Blade hit, like he was kind of like a real up and comer, and the stories about him doing League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and his fights with Connery were kind of like legendary because like they just did not get along at all.
I was front row seat for all that. So just real quickly, my path was extremely unorthodox. Like people like, you know, how do you get into doing this? And I had been in LA, working in visual effects, just sort of worked my way in from being a driver because I wanted to get into filmmaking and I'd always loved visual effects. And then went backpacking in Europe for 6 weeks and wound up staying 13 years, basically. Long story short. So I was living in Prague. I landed in Prague, and it was back before people were really going to Prague, and it was just this artistic community. I was working in theater, which is where a lot of my close connections working with actors comes from. And then it turned out movies started coming to Prague. So after I'd been there about 6 years, and I was an American, but I was fluent in Czech, I started getting on these movies as a local. The first was a Bruce Willis movie called Heart's War, and then League was the second one. So when I got onto League, by that point, it was kind of like I was the local guy who, like, all the bars that we're going to, like, my friends own them kind of things. So I was like, nice. Now we're going here, I mean, we were on night shoots for like months on it. We would do night shoots and leave the set and go to the bar and then go to work the next day. We were in our 20s, so it was all very kind of free and easy. But it was just kind of one of those things where something went horrifically wrong every day and it just became hilarious, like it was like, what's going to happen today, and one thing that was extremely interesting, it was very to have this perspective early in your career, especially now as a director. So Norrington at some point decided that he wasn't going to direct again after this movie. So Fox would come out and they would say, okay, you're going to cut this and this and this scene. And he'd be like, no. Then they'd be like, well, we're the studio. We've just told you have to. And he'd be like, no. And they'd be like, okay, well, if you don't do what we say, we're going to take your career away and you're never going to direct again. And he'd be like, okay, I never want to direct again. Now what are you going to do? And they were like, oh shit. Because then they realized, like, that's their only tool. That's the main thing you have to take away from people. And once this guy was just like, man, I'm going to burn it all down. It was just this thing where it was like, oh my God, we would show up to work some days and not know what set we were going to because the studio said we can't shoot that. And Norrington would be like, we're shooting that. And then we would get in the van and be like, we're going to the one Norrington said. It'd be like, really? This is so incredible. There's a lot of stuff. I could go on forever. But Sean basically would show up and, he does things the way he does things and is used to being treated the way that people usually treat him. And I guess they just, from the word go, kind of, I'm trying to think of stories I can tell that without getting into trouble, but there really aren't that many. But
sounds like Norrington and Connery had a fuck it pact.
Well, one of our favorite Connery stories, like we reviewed the Highlander movies,
yeah,
and we have a whole episode dedicated to it. And when Connery came back for Highlander 2, they paid him like $6 million for like a week of work. And most of that was spent with him, like in a tailor shop, getting like a suit customized and drinking whiskey,
smoking a cigar.
Yeah. No, he was a good old dude. I mean, like I was a data coordinator on that, which meant that I was. It was kind of a jack of all trades thing because at that point I'd been a visual effects supervisor and all these things on smaller movies. So when there was a unit that needed a visual effects supervisor, I would go off and be the visual effects supervisor on it, just like for the day and then go back to like measuring the camera in the visual effects department. But what it meant was that I was literally standing next to the camera for every single take of that movie, looking right at Sean Connery. And I remember this thing, we were about halfway through it. And it's a bit where they first find him in Namibia or in Africa. And it's sort of like they're trying to convince him to join. And then he's like, no. And then all of a sudden, like the bar he was in blows up.
Yeah.
And it pushes into this close up on him. And this is after he was fairly kind of checked out on it. And I was standing right next to the camera and he would always say like, what's the lens? Like he would know a 50 looks at him this way, a 20 looks at him that way. Like he was just remarkable that way professionally. Like he understood all these things. And I remember they're doing this push-in on him. And it was like the time for his close-up. And I was standing there watching him, and he just didn't do anything. And I was watching him like, I get that this has been hard and you don't get on with this guy, but that's bullshit. You know, like I remember feeling that way, like me, the know-it-all at 20, like
talking to Sean Connery.
And then, I mean, this is me thinking, and then went over to the monitor, and the monitor the camera pushes in on Sean, and it just enough of a thing that was absolutely perfect for that lens. But to stand 4 feet away from him doing it, it looks like he's just standing there doing nothing. It wasn't like he was checking the monitor, making sure it was right. He just knew, you know, and seeing things like that, it was remarkable.
That's a cool story.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a little bit about Snake Eyes, because another Tropper regular, Andrew Koji, who's, you know, he plays awesome in Warrior. He was in that movie as Tommy. And, you know, one of the big set pieces, it's in all the trailers and stuff like that, is where they're fighting on that like car rig truck. And it's very Michael Bay-ish. It's got motorcycles zooming in and around it. So like you directed that scene, correct?
Yeah. I directed that scene and created it to some. So that was what's on the screen was probably about the 78th beat sheet that I had written out for that scene. I have probably around 80 different versions of that scene, because we got into that scene and it was like, we are going nuts, you know, and that director I've worked with many times. I first met him on Red, did the Divergent movies with him. And, you know, we're at a point where he's sort of like, there's an action scene here, you know, Madigan's going to come up with something and it's going to be great. He's going to go direct it. For the most part, he might watch this and be like, huh? But that producer as well, you know, it was kind of is Lorenzo de Bonaventura, is someone I've worked with many times as well, who does the Transformers and MEG and Red and all those. So we came up with a version, and then it kind of went through the pipe, and it was like, okay, this is about too big by like 80%. You know, for us, it was like no CG. Like we don't want to do any of this CG wherever we can. At least coming out of visual effects. Usually directors that come out of visual effects are like, well, let's just do it CG because it's easier, especially when you're on set. It's hard to figure out how to do things. Right. But my take on it is it never looks as good, you know, and at least try to get it real. And then if it needs adjusting, like I did this Himalaya sequence.
He is one of us.
In the second G.I. Joe, I did this Himalaya sequence where they're like ziplining through the Himalayas and designed that. That was like a paragraph in the script that was like, they go through the Himalayas. And I created shot for shot that entire thing. I pre-visited out and everyone looked at it and said, well, this is going to be CG. And I was directing, but I was also the visual effects supervisor. And I was like, well, no, it's not. It's like, well, they're not in the Himalayas. I'm like, we're going to get stunt people to do these things. It's like, well, they're cutting off things and how are they going to do that? It's like, we're going to get stunt people to do these things. And every single take, with some exceptions, with every single take, are stunt people coming at each other. And the bit where their arm has to go through another guy's arm, we just CG just that part. Right. So the physicality and the movement of everything that's in there is as real as possible. And then if you get in the post and you're like, it doesn't quite work. Well, let's just tweak the real thing, you know, is always sort of where I was coming at with it. So I, you know, wanting to do all these things real in Snake Eyes, it became quite expensive. And it would have been great if it was like, we're going to do this. All right, well, you got to cut it down by half and let's do that. And now that's what we're doing. But it wasn't. It was kind of like every day we got to cut another $1,000. Like, because it's a house of cards. Once you take out a piece, none of it works. So it's like, I need to at one point they were going in opposite directions and he flies off a car into a car and coming the other way. And it'd be like, he would die. You know, there was
that's a Fast and Furious 9 level.
Yeah. Or like Black Widow. And she like dies like 20 times, you know, it does things that would actually kill you.
Crashes a helicopter, falls out of the sky.
God bless stunt people. They are the unsung heroes.
Oh, they all deserve a raise. Yeah.
100%. And we were, you know, we had there's a stunt guy. The best car guy on earth is a guy named Jeremy Fry, who when you see John Wick like doing crazy shit, unless you're like looking at Keanu, it's this guy. He is this absolute demon behind the wheel, and you meet him and he's like, so guys, what do you think we're gonna do? He's like this soft-spoken, like incredibly humble, just lovely guy. But he, you know, I would work out what the shot was, and he had like a book of every single, you know, there's 30 cars, every single setup that they got to weave through in a very specific way. And we'd look at it and be like, well, it needs to move a little faster and we should be alongside this car when that happens. And he would get on the walkie and be like, car number 7 and car number 28, stand down, and car number 58, come up quicker, you know, like, and work out all this calculus just so that we could get what we needed, how we needed it. And also, like, having the visual effects background, there were things that were very specific that I wanted to try and get Andrew and Henry in it as much as possible, and there was only going to be so much we could actually get them. But I would design shots where we have a stunt guy like fly into a car and then, you know, push in on him, and they do a swap out into Henry, you know, things like that wherever we could. Or like transfers, to design transfers very specifically, like if someone's transferring from one car to another, that's like, it's those shots where people get hurt really badly, because it's sort of like, which car do you attach to? And if somebody, it's just human beings. Yeah. If somebody fucks up their speed, he gets pulled off that one and dragged it. Like, it's, you just don't want to do them. So there's like a bit where the car smashes into the car carrier and he flies, you know, and just making sure that that was designed and shot in a way that we could then, I shouldn't say this, but that the element of him is not a CG person. It's actually a real person, but it's an element that we shot separately. So it's really designing it in a way that it looks as real as it possibly can. All of the physical things smashing against each other are real. We lined up exactly how the camera would be for the stunt guy to transfer and grab onto that rig, and made sure the lighting is exactly the same. And it's good. You kind of don't question it, you know? So there was a lot of things like that where we just fought to get it as real as we could. And also, you know, it's a major character beat. Like, for me, action scenes are nothing if they don't, you know, it's like a song in a musical it's trying to give you a piece of the narrative that is important in a way that is exciting. But if there's not a reason for it, no one's going to give a shit. And the more people give a shit, the more exciting.
We have a term for that on the podcast. We call it laction, lacking in action, otherwise known as boring action scenes. Yeah, but you actually worked on a movie that scarred my lovely bride over here.
We're going to talk about that?
Yes. Right. And she has
dying.
She has some things she wants to ask you about it.
Okay. I'm just going to preface this by saying that if there is one movie that could be responsible for my villain origin story, it is this movie. And it is because of my love affair with the book. Tell me about the MEG.
You know, you may be talking like the only other person on earth that has read the book as well.
God bless you.
I don't know.
I mean, I really didn't want to offend you, but I hate that movie so fucking much.
Hilarious.
The only thing that I don't hate is the shark.
Yeah.
I can't believe we talk to big time action directors like this. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I hate that movie.
Fuck that movie.
Every time anyone mentions that movie, I get physically angry. Like, my face is going to turn red. I'm going to sprout horns. Yeah. This is my villain
when
story.
We walked out of the theater of that movie, because she was so excited to see it because she loved the books. Like
I've read all of the books. All of them.
I couldn't even talk to her. She was so upset.
We went with a couple of friends and my girlfriend walked out. She was like, that was great. And I was like, fuck you, Jen.
The director of that movie is a good friend of mine. So so, you know, that movie was originally, so here's how my involvement with that starts. I get this call and they're like, so there's this giant shark movie and, you know, they want you to direct the action on it. And so the director wants to meet you. This is a Friday afternoon. The director wants to meet you on Monday morning, and the director is Eli Roth. And so I'm like, okay. At this point, I haven't seen any Eli Roth movies. Like, okay. I've been living in Europe. I knew he was like Tarantino's buddy and he does these hardcore horror movies and stuff, but I didn't, I didn't know. So I literally spent like 48 hours watching nothing but like Hostel 1, 2, 3, 4.
I love Eli Roth.
And was kind of like, wow, I was deeply affected by all of it, and was sort of like, I'm trying to figure out how to come at this guy, and then came across an interview with him on NPR where he's talking about movies, and he's talking about his passion of movies. And I was like, I can't equate these two people. Like, he's like a genius. I mean, he is an absolutely brilliant, deep thinking, very creative director, and was like, well, that's interesting. So we met and had this meeting for like 2.5 hours. I mean, it was incredible. Like, he was, all the things he was talking about and what he wanted to do. And then I was like, well, this is exciting. I didn't hear anything for a while. And they were like, Eli Roth's been fired. I was like, oh shit. So he was gone. And it was sort of like, what are we going to do? And then they hired John Turteltaub, who is, by the way, if you've ever met him, is the most hilarious. But I'll bet, you know what? You should reach out to him, because I bet he would love to come on here. I'm serious.
I'll reach out to him like this.
I would love to talk to John Turteltaub.
He is the most self-effacing, lovely.
Yeah, he did all the National Treasure movies.
National Treasures, Cool Runnings. He is one of the funniest human beings you will ever meet, and just like the best guy. But he had a different take on it, and the studio had a different take on it, and the China, this is a big Chinese co-production. It was like the first time there was a co-production that had all these kind of cooks in the kitchen, and the script went through a lot between this and that, and and I don't know if I could say this, but we had Fan Bingbing as a character who I'm sure is not in the book, was going to be the lead, and we were like something like 20 days out from shooting, and the director had a Zoom with her, and it turns out like she can't speak any English. We were like, she can't speak any English? And it became this thing of like, we need to find another actor. I mean, we were days away from shooting and kind of had to find another actor. There was a lot of topsy-turvy things, and there were some kind of great moments in the book that sort of fell out of it. But like the opening of the book, which I love, starts with like a T-Rex kind of wading into the water, the apex predator. And then this shark comes out, and it's like, the T-Rex actually wasn't the top, and that it started off with that. There were more nods to the book in it initially. And then just through, I think, just trying to get it down the pipe and to make it, Turteltaub's style is a little bit more accessible, a little bit more kind of jokey. Pippin the dog was 100% him, and he was like, I'm telling you, this dog, like, he shot that dog.
Okay, I didn't hate Pippin either.
So he got so much coverage of that dog. I swear to God, people see that movie and they're like, put the dog, like he was really kind of right on that. We were like, is the dog on the call sheet again? What the fuck is going on with this dog?
I was going to ask you also if you're working on the second one.
I'm not.
Okay.
No. And that one's I think they're shooting in England. I have read the script for it. It's pretty good. Good.
I don't think Jude believes you.
I'm not going to see it.
Yes,
the main
We're gonna
thing
review
that I pushed on MEG was, what I said to Lorenzo the producer at the beginning was like, you're going to have a CG shark. There's no getting around that. You can't animatronic any of this like you could with Jaws. And there's going to be all the underwater stuff where they're chasing them around. You're going to have a lot of CG in this movie. So anywhere that we can be for real on the open ocean, shooting anything we can physically, helicopters, whatever that is, we need to get that for real, not blue screen. He's like, great, do that. And then I'm in New Zealand, and the guy who's actually in charge of making sure things don't go horribly wrong budget wise is sort of like, no, we're going to be on stage blue screen. It's like, no, we're not. And it was a bit of a thing. But I basically I spent about 4 months shooting on the open ocean, which nothing in my life will ever be hard after that. Because it was brutal. I mean, we had an armada of boats, and it's sort of like, Video Village is on that one, but we're over in this dinghy over here, and I've gone from this one to that one to that one, and a helicopter's flying over that needs to time with this other thing. I mean, it was all pretty pretty hairy, serious stuff. And I spent about 2 weeks directing Statham for all the underwater stuff.
Mhm.
Who is, I think one of, you guys had mentioned, like, other than Jason, who was really amazing to work with. And I'd have to say Statham, and obviously Bautista. I mean, I don't know if you guys have heard much about what Dave Bautista's like, but he is just the loveliest person. Like, he's this big guy, and he is just like a teddy bear. I mean, he is, and shows up and is ready, as I've talked about. But Statham, my God, we had this, the whole scene when he goes down to the shark tank. 100% of the underwater stuff is him. It's all him. In a tank, he used to be a diver. I don't know if you guys know that, but he was like a professional, like
he was like an Olympic level, like diving guy, right?
There's like footage of him with hair, like at some the Commonwealth Games or something, and he is like unbelievable. I mean, he's just physically, he's absolutely amazing. But we had it so that on the pool we put a monitor right down at like water level, and I'd be up here, and he would go down and he would do whatever it was. Like, they're pulling him on this line really fast, and a lot of really physical things. He had to get the shark cage open. He's holding his breath the whole time, and he'd come up and we'd immediately play it back for him, and he'd sit there and tread water and be like, I can get it better. A lot like Momoa, but just super intense, always wanting to get it better, always wanting to know a logic behind what we're doing. And definitely one of those guys, when he shows up on set, like, you got to have your shit together, because like he's worked his ass off and he showed up really prepared, so you better have your story straight. But just a lovely guy, worked his ass off, and did everything he could physically on it. And all the stuff in the helicopters, none of it's blue screened. Like, it's actually me. There was a bit where I was like, well, for this bit where the Chinese cameraman is at the beach and he's following him, we'll just put the stunt guy out on the rails and we'll just film him. And when we went to go up, the cameraman was like, well, you can't go in the helicopter because we can only fit, once we've taken the doors off, we can only fit one other person. And I was like, well, I'm going to have to operate the camera then. And they were like, really? So like, and it was the day they put the GoPro like in the helicopter. So there's this footage of us like flying sideways and me filming. It was an absolute blast. And I think it makes a difference, because you can move, and the sun's on the guy in a different way. And just, if you composited a bunch of plates into a thing, it just wouldn't be the same thing. So,
Right.
Wherever you have a situation, I think there's a bit where the military guys are trying to tag him. Again, we shot all that for real over the guy's back. And, we tried as much as we could to try and at least have that stuff land.
I'm so glad there's
sorry
directors
about
like
the
you
script,
out there.
Jude.
Thank you.
Do you feel better now?
We'll talk.
That means nothing to me. This really makes a really good point, is that you can have all the bells and whistles you want in it, but if the story, doesn't work for you, then really none of it matters, and I think that's the main thing that people need to.
So just getting back to SEE real quick, you mentioned before, like, you came in at the height of the coronavirus restrictions and stuff like that. And I know Jonathan told us a little bit about the challenges of, like, you could only have 10 people on set and stuff like that. And you're used to dealing with these like huge 60-man stunt teams, and you've got like entire battle scenes that you have to shoot. So what were some of the obstacles you had to overcome in terms of like shooting during the coronavirus, pandemic?
Yeah, it was hairy. We had at that point we were so locked down. Like, you didn't go out, you didn't do anything, and every time you came to Canada, you were quarantined for 14 days. I did that 3 times. It was yeah. So when you got out, all day long in your office, wherever you were, you never didn't have a mask on. Like, I remember I got home and I would like get up in the morning and like, no one's wearing a mask. Like, I'd see my wife and be like, oh, that's right, I'm home. But it just felt so odd to be in the presence of any human being and not have a mask on after that. So when we started designing it, it was a very tricky thing, because you have, again, some of the biggest stars on earth and a bunch of guys aspirating really hard around them, and it's all very physical and it's all very hand-to-hand combat. So we just tested like crazy. We kept ourselves as safe as we could. I don't know if it's okay to say, but basically the whole Green Hill Gap was supposed to be shot before Christmas, the shortest days of the year. And we were about 6 days, and we had to finish it. Like, we had this park in the middle of Toronto that was really expensive. We had to get out of there. We had to finish the sequence. And about 6 days before we were finishing it, there was like one case. And he didn't get it at work, but like we had done a Saturday and he was in the mix. And it was like,
oh no,
oh shit. Like that whole bit, like, just checking to see if you're still dead. That day.
Yeah.
And
You're
we were
dead,
like,
man.
and it's Christmas. It's not like let's shoot another week. We're right up against Christmas. And it was like, well, we got these days. But then it was like, Bautista's leaving. So we were like, how do we get Bautista? Because we only had one more day with Dave. And then it was like, well, we're not shooting the next day. We're not shooting the next day while we figure this out. And then it was like, well, Bautista has to go. I think he had to do Guardians, or whatever it was, he had to leave. And so he was gone, and we hadn't gotten that. And then it was like, well, and then it turned out, long story short, we can't shoot anything before Christmas, anything else. So then we came back after Christmas, and finished it off like with a totally different crew, and a totally different kind of system. I was really the only person that stayed. So it was kind of starting all that over was really tricky. Oh, and the restrictions had changed. So we could have a good number of people, like the melee when Take the Fucking Fort and all that came in, and the big things through the trenches. I think we could have like 30 or 40 guys on set at that time. We came back after Christmas. We could have 10 people. So by the time you've got Jason and you've got Haniwa and Kofun and Charlotte, you get like 4 people to fight, you know what I mean? And the shots aren't just long lens here, do a fight, long lens here. It's this around to this. So by the time there are scenes where literally they're fighting, guys are falling down, crawling out of camera, getting back up and running back in. I swear to God. Or they would go through and then duck down behind me, come back, and then run back into the shot. Like, it was crazy shit like that all day long. So by the time you look this way with no one in the background, and then if we had to pan over, there's nobody there. So it was, that was a nightmare. Like, if we had just gotten it all done before Christmas with the full numbers that we could have had, but when it went down to 10 people total on camera, it was absolutely brutal. And we never had any other cases. And the guy that got it was just a fluke. It wasn't like he was being unsafe or anything. It was kind of everywhere at that point. The numbers were very, very high in general in Toronto. So that was very hard. It was kind of ironic because, all right, so I'm outside shooting that. And we have these regulations where only 10 people can be on camera. And then a couple weeks go by. The regulations change. I go to visit the main unit set. And it's the scene, I think, where they're like, kill Queen Kane. And Alfred's like, no. When everyone's like, just kill her. It's that scene. They're inside in an enclosed set. And there's like 60 extras. It was something I'm like, I just shot the whole Green Hill Gap with 10 people. But, I don't know that you notice it. It's hard.
I gotta say, hearing what you had to go through to get that scene, like, out of all the things that we talk shit about, I never once thought, oh, there's only like 3 people on set. Like,
I'm gonna go rewatch that episode just so
You
I
would have
can
heard
appreciate
from
it a
us
little bit
yeah,
more.
we
I mean,
noticed it.
people, I can totally tell you, like, that you sold it for having the army, having a battle, that long shot of like one shot of all the fighters. It was great. That was
we
one of
had
my
all
favorite
the
moments of
people
that
at
episode.
that point. I should probably just let you live the dream, but the stuff most of the stuff up top we got done before Christmas.
Oh, okay.
With some exceptions. All the stuff, Toad's death, we did not, and the whole tackling of the kid and then the ice stuff, all that was after Christmas
Okay.
when we had the regulations. But yeah, it was tough. I mean, the main thing is that, again, every single take, immediately after the take, I'm like standing side by side with Jason, and we're looking at the iPad with it, and there's just no way around having to be in that proximity. And thank God, nothing ever happened. I mean, we were just super careful. We really, really were. We took it all very, very seriously. If you missed a test, you couldn't come to work, you know? I mean, they would have to come find me a lot. I'd be like, oh shit, my test, you know? But they took care of it. I mean, the COVID people on that, I've been, you know, on other productions since. The COVID people on that were just so locked down. They were really, really great.
Yeah. So I have one last question for you that I like to ask everybody, especially directors. What is your Great White Buffalo? What is that one franchise that you just want to get your hands on and work? Is it something big like Marvel or Star Wars, or do you have something else?
Yeah, just Star Wars. All I want to do is direct Star Wars. That's just my end all be all goal in my life, is to direct Star Wars. Everything. Yeah. You know, I kid. You know, who knows? You can't rule anything out, but there's like before Star Wars and after Star Wars. I was just a completely changed person, to be honest. I was like 6 years old and became obsessed and joined the fan clubs, and you know, that's very much I think like that, you know, hitting the exhaust port on the Death Star. Smile, you son of a bitch, and Jaws, of like every action scene kind of boils down. It's like a combination of a Rocky fight and Smile, you son of a bitch. Like, who's the stronger? Who's the tighter? Who's going to win? Who's going to lose? I just got to get that bullet in the right spot. You know, like those and Indiana Jones are obviously, they just affected me deeply as a kid, you know. Star Wars would be great. Although I do find the action that the design tends to be something with a mixture of that kind of awe and wonder and cinematic, you know, feel, and mixed with something like incredibly brutal, you know, because it's sort of like started with that influence and then there came Tarantino kind of thing, you know. So it's definitely sort of a mixture of those two things. So I don't know if what my real wheelhouse is maybe a little too subversive for what that is at this point. You know, I did the second Iron Man. I've spent some time in the when it was nascent, you know, they had only done one movie at that point. So it was like Feige's the room next door and everyone's in one little hallway, and you know, there were things on the whiteboard of like, you know, Thor. They were doing Thor, the first Thor upstairs, and it was all very exciting. I just knew I couldn't get it. Trying to direct through there was going to be tricky. I mean, I started directing on a Terry Gilliam movie in 2003. And that was what I was always trying to find those ways into. And immediately after, I was in Europe, and Iron Man 2 brought me back to America. And while I was in post on that, finishing it up, Lorenzo, you know, I wound up working with Lorenzo de Bonaventura on Red, and he was immediately like, well, you're creating all these action scenes, you should be directing them. Which was just a quicker way in than something like Marvel, where it's a bit more of a machine. But you know, it's hard to beat those movies. Do you guys ever take the piss out of those movies, or what's your stance? I mean, everything up to, but like I feel like Infinity War, and Endgame, they are just to have tied all those movies together is just
I mean, the 23 or 24 movie run, and they all managed to make sense and feed into one each other, and they have like this connective tissue. Like that's incredible, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
Most studios have a hard time with 3 movies. Like they can't keep a trilogy straight. These guys are doing 20.
Well, that, you know, they sit down and they really map it out. They have these they have these retreats where they will sit down and work out the next 20 years. I mean, it doesn't happen by accident. That's what it requires, you know, is really thinking things through from that kind of perspective.
James, I wanted to ask you, so like one of the things about working on TV is you kind of have to keep a consistent visual style across like episodes and shows and stuff like that. And as a second unit director, obviously you had to go with like, I know Tropper talks about how in C, They do a lot of like long shots. It's not like a lot of like coverage where they're constantly cutting. And I think that kind of carried on in the action scenes where you see a lot of like these long takes with Momoa just fighting and stuff like that. So it was probably really challenging for you to kind of like mimic that long take style with all like the heavy action that was going on. Can you tell us like how you went about planning that and what were some of the challenges you faced in shooting it?
Yeah, that's kind of my wheelhouse anyway. I'm a big fan of making sure, again, not to be to the point where logic is dull, but making sure that people know what's going on. It's just like if you look at something like the first Matrix, like when you have a sense of where everything is and how everyone's coming at each other and where each other's energy levels are and that push and pull, the Rocky fight of it all. People just are so much more engaged, so I'm always looking for, my wheelhouse would be to do long takes anyway, but more of a sort of George Miller. George Miller has this way of making sure you know where you are, but then having what we would call like intensifiers, like the scene on the gear shift, the close up on the thing, like mixed in with making sure you know where you are. So like if I were to, when I'm designing it myself, the main thing is like never to the detriment of the kinetic excitability of it, but just to make sure that everyone can sort of have a feel of what's going on. So I'm kind of there. That would be what I'd want to do anyway. But because it was C, it was like, great, let's, you kind of have an excuse to do it. The reason that you often don't do it is because it's a nightmare to shoot it. You really have to have a production that believes in shooting that way and is willing to support it, because I mean, you've got Jason Momoa and Dave Bautista hitting their marks, and like, extra number 5 missed something back there, and you got to do the whole thing all over again. I mean, it's a fucking nightmare. Like that opening shot, we probably shot that for half a day. We probably did 15 takes of it, and then trying to find ways where you can have someone smash into the camera to give you a way out. And, you could probably look at it and see where that happens, especially if there's a chance of, like I say, at any point, any of the actors could move in a way that could hurt them, so you can't just do it all day long. And also it's diminishing returns. You're rusty the first couple, you're getting pretty good through like 6 and 7 and 8, and then it starts to drop off. So you've really got to make sure you get it within that zone,
Yeah.
So the whole machine was built for it, which meant that when the stunt guys were kind of working out the initial choreography, they were thinking about it in those terms. So the way that it would work is, you have fight choreographers, and again, Jason's guys and the John Wick guys, it's this 8711 group who are just they're creme de la creme of this kind of thing. And then you sort of get in there with the camera. You have to think about the camera as like a third character. If you have 2 people fighting, this is another character. If you have 80 people fighting, it's the 5th character of 78, but sometimes it'll be choreographed in a way. It's sort of like, well, this could be a stunt guy. Let's bring it around here. So I'm seeing Jason, or just making sure that relevant story beats are getting locked down. Cause like you say, something like the arrows, it just got missed. So maybe we needed a few more shots that were really showing maybe over their shoulders of, seeing them hit and what they were doing. But yeah, sort of making sure that we have the one are doing what it's doing, but it's also landing the story beats that we're doing, that we need to do. And there were shitloads of, I should send you guys some stuff. I have all this behind the scenes, the way that was shot.
Oh, we would love that.
Oh, please. Yes.
Yeah, now they can go. It's like, well, what are the salty nerds going to think?
If you want a couple of us to come down to set for season 4, we're available.
I have some really cool stuff. So this thing that I had, a DP that I work with a lot was, he would be off doing like Captain America or something. And then he'd come with me on Divergent or whatever. And he came back this one time from the, I think one of the Captain Americas. He was like, it's all bungee cam. I was like, the bungee cam? He's like, check this out. And it's literally like, we don't need any equipment. We just put a thing up there. We throw a bungee over it and you have 0G camera. So it's basically, it's low tech as you can possibly be. where we would just put a pettibone up, throw a bungee over it, and then you could go like a steady cam. You can go from like 2 feet off the ground to about eye level, right? That's what you can do. Well, I want to skim the ground and come up to a close up and then go over here and just be free to move around. And this camera and this technique enabled you to do that. So I then mentioned this when we started designing this. I was like, I said to my DP, a guy named Brian Pearson, who's an absolute genius. You guys should probably talk to him too. I explained this thing to him. He's like, that sounds interesting. He comes up with this thing. I don't even know where he got it from, where we would just have the stunt guys put up a line on a tree there and a line on a tree there. And he built this skate that would just wheels that the bungee sort of went through, so we could pull it or push it however we wanted. We could move anywhere in those fucking trenches and literally go from, we had this cameraman who was like a stunt man. Like he would walk through fire. He'd be like, I don't know, put some stuff on my pants. I don't care. Let's go. You know, like he was a total badass. And he would, and pouring rain, you know, freezing cold, blizzard, whatever, like skimming the ground up to Jason around. There's no equipment. You didn't have to deal with the Steadicam. It's literally just the camera, perfectly balanced. So all he has to do is guide it. And the guy was so good. We did one of the takes, and I think a piece of it is in there. One of the takes, we finished it, and it was like we hadn't been getting it. You know, different people would be off, and we did a take, and it was like perfect. I was like, Jason, that was amazing. He was like, it's NG. We got to go again. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, I lost my monitor halfway through. I was like, what do you mean you lost your monitor? He's like, I couldn't see anything, but no one yelled cut, so I just kept moving the way I'd been doing it the other takes. And literally he was so good that without being able to see what he was doing, was just pointing the camera, and it was absolutely perfect. I mean, like
you guys was like a real life Ira. Yeah.
The guy was
That's
genius.
awesome.
I brought him onto Transformers. Like as soon as I got up to Montreal, I was like, get Jason.
Nice.
Nice. But yeah, so we built certain systems and made sure that they worked exactly to accommodate this in tandem with, you know, John and the stunt team also working on it, and the actor being down with it. I mean, the actor's got to be down with it. You can do all that stuff in John Wick because like Keanu's training, and he's down with the theme of it, as was Jason, as was everybody. I mean, Christian, this guy's a Juilliard graduate. He's like training his ass off, never misses a mark, is in character, giving character beats to like every person he kills, you know, like it's it was a remarkable thing. And it really is a confluence of all those things for that kind of thing to work. You just have to have everybody on board with doing the training and setting up the mechanics of it. You know,
that's amazing. Yeah, you guys do incredible work, man. It's a ton of fun to watch it. And then again, I have to thank you and the crew and everybody for watching our stuff and having a sense of humor about it. Cause I know like listening to you and all the work that you guys put into this show, and then you watch and we're taking the piss out of it. Like you said, it's like
in their office is shitting all over us.
I'm just like, oh man, these guys worked their asses off.
I did want to ask you, other than Jason, who is the most fun to plan an action scene for?
I would say Statham. Insofar as, you know, the experience I had with him on MEG was amazing. You know, what you want are people that are going to show up and do the work, because what you don't want to do is to design a scene that you're like, you know, at the end of the day, it's going to be the stunt guy, you know? And that's what you get with Jason. You get it with Dave Bautista 100%. And everything that we tried to work out for the bigger things on MEG, we could really think about it in terms of like, Statham will do this, you know? You know, I did all those Divergent movies and had to direct Shailene Woodley a lot. And she is unbelievable.
I read those books too. The Divergent books.
Are we in trouble?
No. There's a lot I'll allow.
I've never seen any actor that can literally be just like, so how was your weekend? Action, and just tears. I mean, she's just a remarkable person, and she would physically be up for anything. She'd come in on the weekend, she'd train. I mean, at one point on Brothers Grimm, I directed Matt Damon and Heath Ledger, like for a little piece. I mean, there was this weird bit on Brothers Grimm where, you know, at one point I got a call and they were like, Terry Gilliam's up at the studios, he'd like to meet you. I was like, what? Because he was like this idol of mine, and I've been trying to get on this movie. Went and met Terry, and it led to like months of just basically in Terry's office teaching him how to do 3D animation. The great animator of Monty Python. And I would set up scenes. He'd be like, just let me run it, and like set the cameras and move them around. And it's a miraculous thing. But leading into it, everyone who spent time with Terry knew that the quickest way to get fired is to direct second unit. So everyone's like, I'm not touching it. So the stunt guy's like, I'll do it. And then sure enough, like 2 weeks in, got fired. And there was this big sequence I designed with Terry, and there was nobody down there. So I just started being like, put the camera here, do this, do this. It's like the visual effects coordinator is directing second unit. What's going on? And it led to like a month of me directing this massive, biggest sequence in the movie. Long story short, got cut because they didn't have the money to do the CG at the end. This thing of this giant oak tree scoops up Lena Headey, Matt Damon, Heath Ledger. They're all fighting their way, trying to save her. It was this big, crazy sequence. It wasn't anything major, but it was fucking Matt Damon and Heath Ledger, like, look over there and be scared, that kind of thing. That was probably just because it was like, I couldn't believe I was in the chair kind of thing. Probably the most exciting, because it was new and it was like, I can't believe I'm getting away with this kind of thing.
Well, I just think it's really refreshing to talk to someone who still sees the magic in what they're doing. It's really cool to like watch you talk about experiences that you've had like on different sets and working with different actors and other people in the industry, and still I can tell that you still feel like it's magical, and that's cool.
Yeah. It has to start with that as a default because it is brutally difficult. Like Jonathan said, it's kind of like if you don't have that as in the back of everything you're doing, it's hard to get up at 2 a.m. go to set.
Yeah, I bet.
So James, a lot of directors, their kind of hallmark is their big action scenes. You have John Woo, you have Michael Bay, you have people like that. And I'm just wondering, like, have you thought about making the jump from second unit into being like the main director and making a movie with like Jean-Claude Van Damme or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, 100%. I'm attached to direct a bunch of things now. A long time ago, I pitched on a hybrid version of Rats and Nim, which has gone through many different versions of it. But I'm officially attached to direct it. It's just sort of like, you get attached to direct something at a studio, and then the people that brought you in get fired. It's a whole new group of people running it, and they're like, "What's this Rats and Nim thing?" So things tend to languish or pick up speed or not. But I'm attached to direct a movie with the John Wick guys, Thunder Road, which is basically it's like John Wick on a plane. Basically, the whole thing takes place on a plane. You have this assassin, kind of like a down and out assassin who's just sort of lost his way, but he needs the money, and there's this mark, and he's not sure who it is, and it's someone on this plane. And then it turns out like the plane is just filled with people trying to all kill the same person. And
that sounds awesome.
That does sound awesome.
Fucking nuts from there. So do you know the movie Midnight Run? It's a Robert De Niro movie. It's like one of the most touching. So basically it's this guy, this down and out guy who needs the money. He's a bail bonds, he's a bounty hunter. He's got to bring this person in. And over the course of it, he realizes that like he's on the side of the bad guys. And even though he's kind of like, sort of lost his humanity a little bit a long time ago, there's this part of him that knows it's wrong, even though he needs the money to bring in this person. It's an amazing, it's like one of De Niro's, well, that's a high bar, but it's a really great.
Charles Brolin too, right?
No, Charles Grovin. But it's got a little bit of that track to it. It's really got a great character, and it's Josh Hartnett. So I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about this. Who is training, who is like going to do his own fight. Like we're getting a lot of like secondary characters that are great sort of action names, and it's going to be a very cool little movie. And there's another one with Film 44, which is Pete Berg's company. The director Pete Berg. Yeah. He's a brilliant director, and he's an actor, came out of acting. And with his production company, Film 44, it's this movie called The Beast. which you guys know anything about the president's limo? Have you ever heard of it? So
The
basically
Beast.
the president's limo is basically a tank in the shape of a limo. The Secret Service calls it the Beast.
Okay.
And they've made a big, publicly we know about all its defensive capabilities. It's got like 8-inch thick armor plating, and it's bulletproof and blah blah. It has some offensive capabilities. We don't know exactly what they are, but the script basically takes the notion of that and goes batshit crazy with it, and it's just
That sounds great.
Nice.
So it's sort of like the antithesis of like Olympus Has Fallen. Like instead of all this time
It sounds
on
like
the
Air Force
backstory
One,
of the
but in
bad
the limo.
guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, but instead of like, we don't even give a shit who the bad guys are. We never go into like, here's their machinations and their mustache twirl. It's just like, you meet the president, he's in the middle of this war zone and it's going nuts, and like they're bleeding out and they're dying and they got to get to safety. And it's two guys inside a car from their perspective of one thing after another happening. It's incredible. It's one of the best scripts I've read in a long time.
Wow.
Sounds fun.
And it's
sounds
also
like
one
a
of
lot
those
of fun.
things. Yeah, it's like a 2-man play. And it's also got this kind of double meaning in that there's like, the president was in Afghanistan, he was a soldier, and the Beast is actually referring to this kind of insanity in him that's slowly coming out. So it's kind of got this Fight Clubby, like it is what your take on reality as a viewer is through him, but his take on reality is fraying. So it has this like great sort of
Unreliable
almost
narrator.
like Jacob's,
Yeah.
exactly. And it has this like this Jacob's laddery, like, is what you're watching real or not? And it's really fat. It's a very cool little script. So that's a couple of things that we've got in the pipe that we're looking to get casted up.
We'll have to
and,
cover those on the show.
Oh yeah, we'll talk
dear
about
God.
it for sure. Actually,
Every day on set, I'll be like, shit, what are the salty nerds gonna say?
are we the bad guys?
Oh, we're totally the super villains.
Are we like the mustache twirling? Mwahaha.
I saw this interview at one point with Chad Stahelski, where he went on with the Honest Trailer guys.
Oh yeah.
Is it Honest Trailers where they take the piss out? They basically make
Yeah.
fun of.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it, like him, I don't know if it was him and Dave, but he basically went on with them, and sort of was like, every day on set, it's like, what are the Honest Trailer guys going to say about this? And like, in a way, you kind of need that to keep it honest, because man, you constantly hit these roadblocks. And you're like, should we just say fuck it? Nah, the Honest Trailer guys are going to hit us for this. We got to
Never do that.
Yeah. It's just hard, man, especially when it's a lower budget thing and you're like, it's either in the can or it didn't happen. It's
Well, I mean, as viewers, we're pretty forgiving as long as we're having fun. We're pretty. We might kind of like nod at things and do a little wink here and there, but if the story's good and we're having fun watching it, there's a lot of forgiveness as far as an audience goes. I think we're just along for the ride.
yeah,
Unless it's
great.
invasion.
Yeah, what's
no
up with
more.
invasion?
Oh my god.
Oh man.
I'm so behind on viewing things because I've been in Peru and I have a new baby and I haven't seen anything, but I'll hear like, oh, this show's really great, and then I'll hear people be like, invasion, what's going on? I'm like, put the time in.
I think it always comes down to expectations. Like if you're expecting like a certain level and the show hits it, you're like, okay, that's cool. But if they continue to miss the mark, you get frustrated watching it, and so like you just start criticizing it justifiably. And we've been let down so many times that it's just it becomes.
So what hasn't let you down? What's something you guys have seen recently? You're like, they nailed it.
Ghostbusters.
Yeah, Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Really?
We had a ton of fun with that. What recently? Oh my gosh! What?
See season 2.
Season 2.
Season 2 was great.
Nailed it.
These two really like Yellowstone a whole
Oh
lot.
yeah,
my
we
god,
watched-
loving
Oh, yeah.
Yellowstone.
Yeah.
Great.
I'm trying to think.
Great.
There's a new show on Netflix called Arcane League of Legends. I'm only on episode 4 and I'm freaking hooked.
The new season of Dexter is great.
You started watching it?
Mhm.
Oh, right on. Cool.
Yeah, we just rewatched Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring.
20th anniversary.
Well, yeah, but
Oh yeah, how
Come
did
on.
that hold up?
It's like the perfect movie.
you can't.
I was
talk crap about
somewhere
that.
and one of them came on TV and I was like, ugh. Just from a technological standpoint, I mean, they were taking some big swings for that time. I remember we were doing Brothers Grimm, when that happened, and it was like we were just looking at Cole and like, my God, how'd you do this?
Mhm.
Andy Serkis, man.
But it's hard for that stuff to not age,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's for 20 years, it's done extremely well.
I think it still looks great.
Yeah. I
For
mean,
sure.
Yeah, to us plebes.
yeah. You got a
Yeah, how do you
special-
feel about the new show coming out? They're gonna do it again.
We're kind of wait and see.
Yeah.
We've been watching The Wheel of Time and kind of middle of the road on that. It's not terrible, but it's not exactly like blowing us away. So I'm kind of expecting the worst but hoping for the best.
Yeah, I mean, what'd you think of The
Amazon
Hobbit?
Lord It was
Over bloated.
Yeah, I mean, they took a children's storybook and stretched it into 3 movies. It felt
Yeah.
more like a cash grab than an actual like, hey, let's make a cool Lord of the Rings movie. I think there's elements of it that are really great,
Mhm.
and then there's moments where they're just like, what are we doing? We're spending.
But
Yeah.
you know what's funny is that we just did our top 5 movies of 2021 episode, and we were talking about movies like Boss Level and
that was
Willy's
good.
Wonderland and like a bunch of movies that just
Space
kind of
Sweepers.
space sweepers that just kind of came out of nowhere and blew us away
Yeah,
with how fun they were.
You know what we just watched recently that we all loved was the new Resident Evil movie.
oh yeah,
That was so
Oh,
much
really?
fun.
yeah.
Yeah.
Resident Evil: Welcome to Raccoon City was miles better than the other Resident Evil movies. It was
Yeah.
great.
I'll never forget. I got a call once. I was in a taxi in Rome. I did that show, Rome, on HBO.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
And I was in a taxi in Rome, and my phone rings, and it's this person. They're like, "Hi, I work for Paul Anderson, and he would like to meet you about an upcoming project." I'm like, "Paul Thomas Anderson, he's one of my all-time favorite directors." And
No,
she's like,
Paul W.S. Anderson.
Kate is just
and it was like she
Yeah.
was ready. Like she's heard this a million times, and she goes, "No, Paul W.S. Anderson, director of Resident Evil and like How to Spiel." And I went, "Oh yes, great, okay."
As you do.
so
As you do.
I kind of wasn't ready for it. I mean, they cranked those movies
Oh,
out.
yeah,
and
that guy
they're-
exists. Mhm.
And they're I mean, not to look what they're able to do. Look, to get any movie made is incredibly hard, and
Yeah.
they take big swings with those movies. I mean, there's a lot
Mhm.
there's a lot of work in those movies that is that's hard to do. But it was a funny little. I was like, oh
Yeah, this
Yeah.
new Resident Evil movie though, it just kind of it just owns what it is. Just,
right.
No,
No.
it has nothing to do with him,
No,
which is why it was good.
Oh,
I think he got a producer
He
credit
has a
or
producer
something.
cred on it.
Yeah, I think because he owns the name Resident Evil or
don't
something
know.
to do with the franchise ownership.
but is
But
it
the movie
still?
itself,
It was fun.
yeah,
Does it still have his wife?
Mila? No.
Mm-mm.
no,
Yeah.
it's a
Oh,
completely
so it's
different.
a totally okay.
Yeah.
Total- yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
It's
whole,
like a prequel.
It,
I
it
would
actually
say.
kind of follows the games.
Yeah.
yeah,
for a
it,
change.
it follows the source material,
Oh, right.
which is a big deal for us. So
Okay.
we enjoyed the heck out of it. It was a lot of fun.
I wonder. You gotta always wonder. Like Michael Bay is always on the Transformers, but
Mhm.
he's in there. He was with us in Peru, and
Mhm.
Yeah,
He's-
well, you were gonna say
I was gonna say if you haven't seen Boss Level, be sure to check that out. It's
Yeah.
on Hulu.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mel Gibson and
Frank Grillo.
Frank Grillo. It's
Uh-huh.
a fantastic action
Oh.
movie. I think you'll probably really like it.
It's an action version of Groundhog's Day,
Yes.
basically.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I gotta
Yeah.
check out
Concept.
Frank Grillo. He's someone
Yeah.
we're kind of after for some. I'd probably.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
Amazing,
Honestly,
isn't he?
he's been doing stunts and backup for so long. So like when this movie came out, we were like, all right, let's see if Frank Grillo can be a leading man, and he so can.
Yeah, he
movie was
nailed it.
amazing.
It has the action
Wow.
was so much fun to watch, and then there's this heartwarming story about him and his son, and he just freaking nails those dramatic
Mhm.
scenes too.
Oh.
Wow.
It's a Joe
that's
Carnahan
sweet.
movie. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Great.
Cool. All right, James, thank you so much, man, for joining us today and we're rolling up to 2 hours here, man. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Wow.
And where can people find you on social media, and what kind of projects you talk about Transformers?
Transformers will come out about 5 years from now. So
when the
I
post
won't be
production's
able
done.
to talk about it or show any
Yeah.
of my work on that. No, they did just. It has to be a summer release, and they were trying to push it for this summer, which would have been a disaster. So luckily they did, but you got to put it back like a whole year at that point.
Mhm.
So I think
Right.
it's the summer of 23.
2024, right? Or 2023?
I don't know. We're coming to 2022, so
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
at least 2023, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
2020. Yeah. So not this summer, but next summer.
Okay.
Yeah, and The Beast and Fight or Flight are the two projects I have in development. I'm on Mr. James Madigan is my. I don't really do much with it. Like every now and then, my wife will post something. I'll be like,
I mean, social media is not for everybody.
yeah. But it's basically my name with a Mr. in front of it.
Okay,
Is my
cool.
Instagram. Yeah.
Very good. All right. Thank you, sir. All right, everybody. That is it for the interview. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Matt Vader, where can they find you on the socials, bud?
They can find me at Matt Vader 74 on the Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram.
Directors beware.
Yeah. I will call your shit out.
You gotta do
Jude,
it.
where can they find you at?
You can find me at I am Jude Juju on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Or if you want to talk about the Meg books that we both love so much, James.
Right on. Matthew Kadish, how about you, bud?
You can find me on Twitter at Matthew Kadish, Kadish, and kadishbooks.com. Takes you to my Amazon page if you want to check out my novels like Earthman Jack. And also sign up for our newsletter at saltylist.com. When you do that, you get access to a private RSS feed where we publish all types of podcasts that we don't let the regular public listen to.
And I'm Alex, the Salty Nerd. You guys can catch me on our Discord app. Go to saltynerddiscord.com. We have chat rooms set up for just about every show that we talk about, including C. And if you guys want to jump in and talk about that with us, you can head over there. I'm in that chat room daily, talking with our friends and fans of the podcast. And we'll catch you guys next time. Stay salty, my friends.